I was 58 years old when my son got married, and I thought it would be one of the proudest days of my life. I had raised Daniel alone, working double shifts, scrubbing my hands raw in hospital gloves, and staying up with him through every fever, every nightmare, every broken dream. His father had left long ago, and I carried the weight of two parents on my shoulders. That wedding was supposed to be our victory lap, the moment I finally got to breathe, to stand beside him and know every sacrifice had been worth it. But instead, I found myself sitting in the kitchen of the reception hall watching my only child's wedding through a swinging door. I had paid for everything. Every flower, every candle, every chair. I signed the checks that covered the custom invitations, the oversized floral arch, even the 5-tier cake. Yet when I arrived at the reception, no one met me at the entrance. There was no name card, no seat saved, no place among the smiling faces. Just a folding chair tucked behind the caterer's trays, next to the smell of garlic and grease. That was where they sat me. I stared at the chair for a long moment before I lowered myself onto it. My mauve chiffon dress crumpled beneath me, the one I had chosen so carefully, spending 3 hours at the salon that morning, pretending this day would mean something. But no one even looked at me. Not Daniel, not his bride Emily, no one. The catering manager, a boy who couldn't have been more than 20, tried to mumble something about the bride not wanting visual clashes with the theme. Theme. That word rang in my ears like an insult. I wanted to laugh, but instead I sat quietly, pressing my napkin to my lips, pretending to dab at an invisible stain to keep the tears from showing. I caught glimpses through the swinging door, gold light spilling from chandeliers. Daniel spinning Emily across the dance floor, her mother wiping tears of joy like she was the one who had raised him, like she was the one who stayed awake through his asthma attacks and sewed buttons back on his school uniforms. I felt invisible, a ghost at the edges of my own son's life. I told myself not to ruin it, not to be the kind of mother who made a scene. I swallowed the ache, swallowed the rage, swallowed the humiliation until it sat like a stone in my chest. But inside, something cracked. A hairline fracture so small at first it barely registered, but I knew one day it would split wide open. As the music swelled in the reception hall, I sat with a chipped plate of cold chicken in front of me, untouched. The speeches began: her father, her mother, even Daniel himself. They toasted to love, to family, to gratitude. My name was never mentioned. Not once. I wasn't thanked. I wasn't acknowledged. I was erased. And then at the peak of it all, I made a decision. When the last bite of cake was served, I slipped quietly out of that kitchen and stepped into the cool night air. I pulled out my phone, my hands steady, my heart strangely calm. 3 calls: the florist, the band, the bar manager. Simple, polite cancellations. The flowers for tomorrow's brunch gone. The second half of the band's set canceled. The open bar meant to last until midnight closed. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel regret. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. They thought they could tuck me into the shadows, erase me from my own son's story. But I wasn't gone. I was done being silent, done being the convenient wallet, done being the woman no one wanted in the photographs. That night in the hotel, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in my dress, staring at the ceiling, replaying every laugh I heard through that swinging door, every cheer, every clink of glass that reminded me I wasn't wanted. And yet with every breath I felt myself hardening, not breaking, but forging something new. Because I knew one thing: they believed I would always stay quiet. They believed they could take everything and leave me with nothing. But they were wrong, and soon they would see just how wrong they were. When I woke the next morning, my phone was buzzing with messages. Missed calls from Daniel, half a dozen from the event coordinator, and one from Emily's mother that I didn't even bother opening. I imagined the chaos when the brunch had no flowers, when the bar shut down early, when the band packed up their instruments mid-song. I wondered if Emily cried the way I had cried in that kitchen. I wondered if Daniel finally noticed the empty seat where his mother should have been. But I didn't answer. I sat at the little desk in the hotel room, staring at the screen, and for the first time in years, I let the silence be my answer. By noon, the calls stopped. By evening, there was only one message from Daniel. A single line. Mom, why are you doing this? I almost laughed. After everything, that was what he asked. Not Mom, are you okay? Not Mom. I'm sorry, just why? As though I was the problem. As though erasing me from his life was normal, but finally drawing a line in the sand was madness. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove home. The house was quiet, still carrying the faint smell of perfume from when I'd gotten ready for the wedding. My dress hung over the chair, wrinkled and stained with my tears. I sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time since I left that kitchen, I allowed myself to sob. The sound that came out of me didn't even feel human. It was raw, jagged, torn from years of sacrifice, dismissed like it was nothing. I thought of every night I stayed up sewing his Halloween costumes, every penny I stretched to pay for his college tuition, every dinner I skipped so he could have seconds. And in return, I got a folding chair in the kitchen hidden away like I was something to be ashamed of. It wasn't just Emily. It wasn't just her family. It was Daniel, my son, the boy I raised, the man I thought would stand beside me forever. But when I finally cried myself empty, I sat in the silence, and I realized something. I wasn't just mourning what happened at the wedding. I was mourning years of little betrayals I had chosen not to see. The way he stopped calling after he met Emily. The way he let her speak for him at every family gathering. The way he never corrected her when she dismissed me as old-fashioned or overly emotional. He had been slipping away from me for years. The wedding was just the final cut. And still, even as my heart cracked open, another part of me began to burn with something sharper than grief rage. Because I had funded their fairy tale, I had signed every check. Without me, there would have been no arch of roses, no golden chandelier, no feast for 200. I had given them that day. And in return, they erased me. I thought back to the phone calls I had made, the quick cancellations, how easy it had been, how much power I still held tucked quietly in the background, and I realized I wasn't done, not by a long shot. There were accounts still in my name, contracts still tied to my signature, money that had flowed from my hands into theirs like water, unacknowledged, unthanked. And if they thought I would keep giving, keep bleeding myself dry for the privilege of being humiliated, then they had never really known me at all. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and began making lists. Venues, payments, joint accounts, assets. For years, I had been the one holding everything together quietly, invisibly. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. But silence can be a weapon, and this time, I was going to use it. The weeks after the wedding felt like living in the hollow of a storm. On the outside, everything looked calm. My little house was tidy. The garden bloomed. The neighbors waved hello. But inside me, a war was raging. Every time I thought of Daniel, every time I replayed the sight of Emily's mother crying, happy tears, while I sat in the kitchen, my chest tightened with both grief and fury. Daniel didn't visit. He didn't even call again. It was as though my silence had given him permission to move on, to tuck me neatly into the past like a box stored in the attic. I checked my phone more times than I care to admit, hoping, praying for one message of remorse, one apology. None came. Instead, what came were the bills. My name was still on the catering deposit, the rental contracts, the bar agreement. Thousands of dollars that had been drained from my account, all for a day where I wasn't even allowed to sit among the guests. I stared at those invoices, my hands shaking, realizing just how deeply I had been used. The breaking point came one afternoon when I stopped by the bank. The teller pulled up my accounts and mentioned casually that Daniel and Emily had inquired about adding their names to the joint family savings. My savings. The money I had built out of decades of missed vacations, skipped luxuries, long nights in sterile hospital rooms under fluorescent lights. They wanted access to that too. Something inside me snapped. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of files, bank statements, and the remnants of my mother's jewelry box, the same jewelry I had once planned to pass down to Emily someday. I realized I didn't owe them any of it, not my money, not my memories, not even my forgiveness. I began pulling the threads loose, quietly, methodically, without a single word to Daniel. I closed accounts. I redirected funds. I changed beneficiaries. It was like reclaiming pieces of myself I hadn't even realized I'd given away. And then buried in a folder I hadn't touched in years, I found something that made me go still. It was the deed to a small property on the edge of town, a hall half forgotten left to me by my late uncle. I had dismissed it as worthless years ago, too run down to rent, too expensive to fix. But as I stared at the paper, a wild thought took root. That reception hall where they had shamed me, that wasn't the only place in town people booked for weddings. Over the next month, I poured my energy into that property. I met with contractors, painters, and designers. I cashed out part of my retirement savings and invested it not in them, but in me. Slowly, the hall transformed, peeling paint, replaced with gleaming wood, broken windows, swapped for stained glass gardens, blooming where weeds once choked the path. And when it was done, I christened it with a name that carried my mother's legacy, a name Daniel could never erase me from Margaret's place. Within weeks, the bookings came. Couples enchanted by the warmth, by the intimacy, by the care in every detail. Every weekend, laughter and music filled the hall that bore my name. I stood in the back, sometimes unnoticed, watching strangers make joyful memories in a place that had risen from my pain. One evening, as I walked through the garden lights after another successful event, my phone buzzed. Daniel. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was tight, frayed around the edges. Mom, we heard. Is it true? Did you open your own venue? I closed my eyes, the night air cool against my skin. Yes, Daniel, it's mine. There was silence on the line, then a faint scoff. Emily's furious. She says you're trying to humiliate us after everything we planned. Humiliate you? I cut in, my voice steady, calm. No, Daniel. I'm just finally taking back what was always mine. My name, my pride, my place. His breath hitched as though he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel small speaking to him. I felt unshakable. Because I realized something in that moment. They had tried to erase me, but instead they had forced me to remember who I was. And that was only the beginning. Not long after that call, word began to spread. Margaret's place wasn't just another venue. It was becoming the venue. The couples who walked through its doors felt the love and the pain that had built it, even if they couldn't name it. Every bouquet of flowers, every polished floorboard, every glowing lantern in the garden was my silent rebellion, my proof that I would not stay hidden in a kitchen again. Emily's family hated it. I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances, how her mother complained that I had stolen their spotlight, how Emily herself ranted online about people who don't know their place. I laughed when I saw that phrase. Because I knew my place now. It was right here in the center of everything I had built, not on the sidelines of someone else's celebration. But Daniel, he was quieter. I think part of him wanted to be proud, but Emily's voice drowned him out. He never came to see the hall, never called again after that one phone conversation. His absence stung like a fresh wound, but I learned to live with it. Because every weekend I watched mothers take their rightful place beside their children, honored and cherished. Every time I saw it, it healed a little piece of me. And then one evening, months later, as the sun dipped low and the garden lights flickered on, I saw a familiar figure standing at the edge of the property. Daniel. He looked older, somehow wearier, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. For a long moment he didn't approach. He just watched. Finally, he walked over. Mom, he said softly, his voice catching, it's beautiful. I searched his face, looking for sincerity, for something real. You didn't think so at the wedding? I answered, my tone sharper than I intended. He winced. I didn't know. I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you, Emily said. He stopped himself, shaking his head. No. I should have stood up for you. I should have given you the place you deserved. For the first time in a long while, my eyes stung with tears, not from grief this time, but from the faint glimmer of hope. Do you know what it felt like? I whispered, to watch another woman be treated like your mother, while I sat in the kitchen like hired help. Daniel's voice broke. I'm sorry, Mom. I thought keeping the peace with Emily was the right thing, but I see now. It cost me you. The silence between us was thick with everything we'd lost. I wanted to pull him into my arms to tell him I forgave him completely. But forgiveness is not a single moment. It's a path, and we were only at the beginning. So I nodded, letting the quiet hang. I don't know if we can ever go back, I admitted. But I know this, I won't let anyone erase me again. Not even you. He swallowed hard, then nodded. I don't want you erased. Not anymore. We stood there under the glow of the garden lights, two people broken by choices and silence trying to find a way back to each other. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't whole, but it was something. As he walked away that night, I realized the most powerful revenge hadn't been canceling the brunch or cutting the bar early. It hadn't even been tripling down on my independence with Margaret's place. The real revenge was simple. I had survived what was meant to break me. I had built a life that was mine on my terms in my name. And as I closed the doors to the hall, the laughter of strangers echoing behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt since that awful wedding day. Peace. If my story has touched you, if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or cast aside, know this: your worth does not vanish because others fail to see it. You have the power to reclaim it, to rebuild, to rise. Please like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe for more stories like mine. And tell me in the comments, have you ever found strength in the very place where someone tried to break you? Because sometimes the sweetest justice isn't destroying others, it's becoming unshakable yourself.